Hey folks, Simon here from Velo Performance. Let's talk about turbo training and which FTP test is the right one for you. It's definitely the start of winter training season, and that means doing more indoors on a turbo trainer because, let's face it, the weather in the UK at this time of year is pretty rubbish.
Here in Blackrock and Salthill, both today and yesterday.
Turbo training is a great way to keep your training on point. It's a great way to grow your power over time, and it's definitely something that we use to make sure that the cyclists that we coach are growing in their fitness and gaining confidence in their ability to ride their bikes outside. Here's the thing though, your power numbers outside versus inside can often be out as much between 10 and 15% to the positive or the negative. This is why when we make the transition to indoor training, we should really do an FTP test to make sure we have the right zone set to make our training meaningful. What about AI and FTP detection? Yeah, good call. There's some really interesting AI FTP detection software out there at the moment. And it's something that I'm going to start using in my own training, and I'll talk about it more in my vlogs over the next couple of months, because let's face it, some people really just don't test that well. So using this kind of software could be a great way to make sure that their training is on track and also their FTP numbers are right. But that's not what this video is about, and I'll talk about that in a later video when I'm doing my vlogs. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 3 tests that you can perform to get your indoor training zones. I'm going to talk about 3 different FTP tests that you can perform and why, which test is best for beginners, intermediate and advanced cyclists, the pros and cons of each test and what to look out for. And if you stick around right to the end, I'm going to talk about how to prepare and fuel before your test to get the best from your testing, and give you some coaching insights on what to do if your test doesn't go to plan. Righty, let's get into it. The ramp test. The ramp test is short and only really gets super tough in the last 2 or so minutes. You start the test at roughly 100 watts, then move the needle up by 20 watts every minute. The object of this is to hold on for as long as you can, pushing out as much power as you can right up until you're done. To get your FTP, you take your last 1 minute power reading and calculate 75% of it. You can also get your heart rate zones by working out between 92% and 95% of your peak heart rate using the threshold Coggan 5 zone model to set them. Now you can use different models if you like, but that's the one that we use here at Velo. The pros for this kind of test is that it's sure. It's perfect for beginners because it requires less pacing, just a lot of grit and determination and putting your head down and putting the power out. The test usually gives pretty sound numbers and is suited for cyclists who do a lot of turbo training. It's also great for crit racers and cyclocross riders to get their numbers for training. Some of the cons to look out for: it can over and underestimate your FTP by about 5 or 10%. And you do have to have some base level of fitness to be able to deliver on this test. And I think definitely it's best suited for people who are focusing their training inside. The 20-minute FTP test. This is a tough 20-minute pacing effort where you are aiming to give your best power for a full sustained 20 minutes. It literally is head down and churn the watts out. To get your FTP from your test, you take your average for the 20 minutes and calculate 95% of it. And for heart rate zones, calculate between 92 and 95% of peak using the threshold Coggan 5 zone model as talked about before. Pros of the test: it can be way more accurate than the ramp test, and you don't need to have a smart trainer for this. I think it's great for triathletes and cyclists looking to TT and do longer, sustained, harder efforts. There are some cons to this test. You have to be fit for it and be a skillful pacer. And personally, I don't think it's for beginners. It can be pretty hard for beginners to get a true FTP value for this because it requires that full-on, all-out effort. The 2 times 8-minute FTP test. This is less full-on than the 20-minute test. You perform it after a long warm-up, and the test requires you to push your most sustainable watts out that you can hold for 8 minutes, recover for 10 minutes, and then repeat that process. So you really got to push again for another 8 minutes and hold as higher sustainable watts that you can. To get your FTP from the test, you get an average of both 8 minutes, working out 90% of it, and for the heart rate zones, calculate 93% of your peak using the threshold Cogn 5 zone model as talked about earlier to set your zones. Some of the pros of this test is that it's easier to pace and it's far less daunting. It's good for intermediate and advanced riders, and you don't need a smart trainer for it. A big con of this is it can overproduce your power numbers, especially for advanced cyclists who have a very high VO2. Coaching insights, preparation and pitfalls. The warm-up for all of these kind of tests I've talked about tend to be, in my opinion, too short. So I always give an extra 20-minute warm-up before each test. After each test, I get my cyclists to perform a series of sessions at their new FTP just to make sure that they actually can hit that FTP for longer efforts over time. Trust me, if you can't hit your FTP, then your FTP is wrong. What happens if you completely bodge the test? Well, congratulations, you're a human being. We all have bodged tests from time to time. It happens to every single one of us. And if it does happen, reschedule it to a time that you know that you were well prepared for it and you're feeling ready mentally and physically to give it your best shot. Nutrition plays a big part in testing effectively. The day before, make sure that you are hydrating well, and in the 2 meals before, make sure that they are carb rich. And during your warm-up and in the test, make sure you're drinking at least 500 mils of fluid with 60 grams of carb mix in it. How often should you test? It takes about 8 weeks to see full adaptations of a consistent training plan. So personally, I feel that if they're too close to each other, you never really seal the training adaptation that you're looking for. So every 3 to 4 months is probably about right. So there you have it. Some breakdowns of different types of FTP tests that you can do to make sure that your numbers are right for all your indoor training zones. Performing an FTP test and making sure that your FTP number and your power numbers for your training zones are right will really ensure that you are growing your fitness positively and building your power this winter. Add that to a structured strength and conditioning program. I can guarantee you're going to come out of the winter way more powerful and stronger than you went into it. And if you're new to strength training or you want to know where to get started, I've got a video for you which I'm going to put here or here that you can watch next.